Let me ask you something. When was the last time you told yourself the truth? Not the watered down version, not the I'll get to it later version. I mean the hard truth, the uncomfortable one, the one that stings a little. Because that moment right there is where transformation begins. People walk around with dreams in their hearts, but lies on their lips. They say they want change, but they live like they're fine staying the same. They say they want to be happy, keep doing things that sabotage their peace. And the worst part, they've gotten so used to lying to themselves, they believe it's just who they are. But let's be clear, self-deception is the beginning of self-destruction. If you keep telling yourself you're not good enough, not ready, not capable, eventually your actions will line up with those beliefs, not because it's true, but because you made it true. Here's what no one wants to hear. Excuses feel comfortable because they protect you from responsibility. It's easy to say, I didn't have time, or they didn't support me. It's harder to say, I wasted time scrolling, or I didn't speak up when I should have, but only one of those leads to growth. The lies we tell ourselves, I can't change. I've always been this way. It's just who I am. Those aren't truths. They're choices. Choices we've repeated so often, we've built identities out of them. Here's the breakthrough. You are not your story. Your past might explain you, but it does not define you. You don't have to keep repeating the same chapters. The moment you realize that the story you've been telling is optional, the moment you begin writing a new one, and let's talk about accountability, because most people flinch at that word. They think it means blame, punishment, shame. But accountability isn't a prison. It's the key. The moment you say, this is on me, is the moment you realize you have the power to change it. Because if you caused it, you can fix it. And if you didn't cause it, you can rise above it. It all begins with self-honesty. You can't fake greatness. You can't bluff your way to a breakthrough. Confidence doesn't come from saying the right things, comes from living them, from keeping promises to yourself, showing up on the days you didn't feel like it and being real enough to admit where you fell short. People spend so much time trying to look good to others, but never stop to be honest with themselves. Let me be clear, it's not about being perfect. It's about being real with your pain, real with your patterns, real with your potential, because the mirror doesn't lie, it reveals. And most people are afraid to look in that mirror because deep down they already know what needs to change. I'll tell you this, nothing changes until you confront it. Your breakthrough is waiting on the other side of your truth, not the filtered truth, not the polite version, the real, raw, radical truth, the one that says, I'm better than this. I've been coasting, I've been hiding, but I'm done lying. I'm ready to rise. So stop lying to yourself, not because the truth is easy, but because it's the only path to power. Your next level is buried under layers of your own excuses. Dig them up, tear them down, face the mirror, and reclaim your life. Most people walk through life blindfolded, not because they can't see, but because they've chosen not to. It's easier to lie to yourself than to face what's really holding you back. It's more comfortable to say, I'm fine, than to admit you're stuck. But here's the brutal truth. Self-deception is the first step to self-destruction. You don't need another enemy in your life when you've already become your own. The most dangerous lies are not the ones people tell you. They're the ones you whisper to yourself when nobody's watching. This is how it starts. You ignore that voice in your gut. You convince yourself that the standard you're living at is good enough. You push aside that nagging feeling that you were made for more, that you're playing small, that you're shrinking your dreams just to fit into a world that demands less from you. You don't call it lying. You call it being realistic. You call it being mature. You say you've accepted your life, but deep down you haven't. You're tolerating it. And every time you do, you lose a piece of yourself. People think lies are these big dramatic things, but often they're quiet, subtle, harmless at first glance. Start next week. It's not that bad. Maybe this is just how life's supposed to be. That's how the destruction begins. One tiny compromise at a time, one excuse at a time. And before you know it, you've built a life that's completely disconnected from the person you were meant to become. You look in the mirror and you don't recognize what's staring back, not because you've changed, but because you've drifted. Slowly, silently. It all started when you stopped being honest with yourself. The truth isn't always pretty. It doesn't pat you on the back and tell you everything's okay when it's not. It doesn't let you hide behind your circumstances. It holds up a mirror and demands that you look. It says, if you're not where you want to be, then do something about it. If you don't like who you've become, then change. But instead of facing that truth, people defend their lies. They defend their limitations. They justify their excuses. They wear their wounds like badges of honor and call it strength, when in reality, it's fear. Fear of what it would mean to actually own their life instead of blame it on everything else. Let's be real, you can't change what you won't confront. And you won't confront anything if you keep convincing yourself there's nothing wrong. Here's what you need to understand. There is nothing more powerful than a person who stops lying to themselves. Nothing more unstoppable than someone who says, I see where I've messed up. I'm ready to take full responsibility, because that's where real growth begins. That's where your life starts to shift. Every major breakthrough in your life will be born in the moment you choose honesty over comfort. That's when things get real. That's when the fog lifts and you start to see clearly. But clarity costs. It requires courage. You have to be willing to drop the story, the excuses, the blame, and that's hard. That's painful. Because it means admitting that maybe it was never your boss. Maybe it wasn't your parents. Maybe it wasn't the economy or your past. Maybe it was you. Maybe it's still you. And that level of ownership, that's terrifying, but it's also freeing. Because when you stop lying to yourself, you stop waiting. You stop hoping that life will just magically get better. You stop putting your power in other people's hands. You reclaim your time, your energy, your mind, and more than anything else, integrity. Not the kind you show to the world, but the kind that lets you sleep at night because you know you're not hiding anymore. You know you're not pretending. You know you're finally showing up as who you really are, not perfect, but honest. That kind of honesty builds strength. It builds grit. It builds a version of you that doesn't need validation, doesn't need permission, doesn't need to be carried because you've become someone who can carry yourself. None of that happens until you stop playing games with yourself, until you stop pretending that good enough is the goal, until you stop using comfort as a substitute for fulfillment. The lies you keep telling yourself are not protecting you, keeping you small. And the longer you stay in denial, the more pain you're going to feel. So if you're tired of being stuck, if you're sick of feeling like something's missing, it's time to stop lying to yourself. Not tomorrow, not next year, right now. Because this moment, this choice is where everything begins to change. Excuses are seductive. They don't show up as lies. They show up as logic. They dress themselves up as reasons. They sound intelligent. They feel protective. I don't have time. I wasn't born into the right family. It's too late for me. I just don't feel ready yet. The truth is, none of those are the real problem. Real problem is you've gotten good at justifying your limitations instead of destroying them. And the longer you cling to those excuses, the deeper you bury yourself in the same life you say you want to escape. Excuses are a form of emotional armor. They protect you from having to face your potential because deep down you know it's going to be uncomfortable. Growth is demanding, change is painful. But staying stuck, that's a slow death. It's the kind of pain you learn to live with. That's the most dangerous kind because you stop realizing it's even there. You normalize it. You tell yourself, this is just who I am. But let me tell you something. Just because something is familiar doesn't mean it's true. Just because you've repeated a lie doesn't mean it should become your identity. Excuses become habits and habits become identity and identity becomes destiny. If you tell yourself the same story long enough, you'll forget it's even a story. You'll treat it like a fact. I've always been this way is one of the deadliest things you can say to yourself. No one is born lazy. No one is born afraid. No one is born stuck. You learn those patterns. And if you learn them, that means you can unlearn them. But first, you have to stop pretending that the excuse is real. Because every time you buy into it, you buy out of your future. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Most people would rather be right about their limitations than wrong about their potential. Why? Because it's easier to live inside a box you understand than to risk stepping into a world that demands more from you. Excuses feel safe. They let you off the hook. They let you point fingers. They let you avoid doing the real work. But they also rob you. They rob you of power. They rob you of growth. They rob you of the person you could have become. The thing about excuses is that they're always available. Life will never stop giving you reasons to delay, to doubt, to stay still. There will always be fear. There will always be distractions. There will always be resistance. If you keep waiting for the perfect time, the right feeling, the green light from the universe, you'll wait your whole life. Action doesn't follow motivation. It creates it. You don't need another reason. You need a decision. Moment of clarity where you say, I'm done letting these lies run my life. Start listening to how you speak to yourself. How many sentences begin with, I can't? Or I'm not. Or it's hard because. Catch them. Question them. Replace them because those aren't just words. They're blueprints and your brain is building your life based on them. When you say, I can't, your brain says, okay, I'll stop trying. When you say, it's too late, your energy collapses. When you say, I don't know how, you immediately shut off your creativity. But when you say, I'll figure it out, everything changes. When you say, I'm not waiting anymore, your life starts to shift. Not because the circumstances change, but because you do. This isn't about pretending things are easy. It's about refusing to let your excuses become your ceiling. You have every right to acknowledge your struggle, but don't you dare let it become your excuse. There's a difference between explanation and justification. One gives you insight. The other gives you an exit. Most people are constantly exiting the responsibility that would set them free. The people who create powerful lives aren't the ones who were handed perfect conditions. They're the ones who decided that their excuses weren't going to win. If you want to change your life, start by changing your standards. And if you want to change your standards, eliminate your excuses, tear them out, replace them with commitments, replace them with action, replace them with the kind of discipline that doesn't wait for permission. Excuses make you feel better today, but they cost you everything tomorrow. And the longer you hold on to them, the harder it gets to remember what life feels like without them. So the next time you feel yourself reaching for that excuse, pause. Ask yourself, is this helping me grow or is this keeping me safe? Then be honest, brutally honest, because your future is not being shaped by the world around you. It's being shaped by the lies within you. And the most common one, that you're not ready, you are. You've just been excusing your way out of action, but not anymore. Not after this, because now you know the truth, and the truth is your way out. You are not your story. That's the line most people hear, but few are ready to live by. Because let's be honest, most people are more committed to the story of their past than the possibility of their future. They don't realize that every time they repeat that same narrative, why they failed, why they're broken, why they can't trust, why they'll never be enough, they're not just expressing a memory, they're reinforcing an identity. An identity cemented by repetition becomes the prison cell of potential. It becomes the filter you see life through, the excuse you lean on. The reason you stay stuck, even when everything in you wants to move forward, it starts small. Something happened in your life. You were rejected, overlooked, criticized, betrayed. And instead of healing through it, you built a story around it. That story gave you an explanation. It gave you closure. It made things make sense. Then it became your truth. And now you carry it like a badge. You lead with it. You defend it. You hide behind it. It's no longer something that happened to you. It's become who you are. And this is where the danger begins, because once you attach your identity to pain, you start organizing your life around it. You begin attracting patterns that match your story. You live in a loop. And the worst part, you don't even notice it anymore. People say, I'm just not lucky, or I've always had bad relationships, or nothing I do ever works out. But those aren't facts. Those are stories built from real events, yes, but distorted through fear, through wounds, through time. Unless you interrupt that narrative, you will keep getting what you've always gotten. Not because it's fate, but because your mind is wired to find evidence for what it already believes. So if you keep telling yourself the same story, guess what? Life will keep confirming it. Not because that's all there is, but because that's all you're allowing yourself to see. You want to change your life. You've got to change your narrative. That means taking ownership of the language you use every single day. It means catching yourself when you speak in limitation. It means noticing when you start with, I always, or I never, or I can't, because those phrases are not reflections of reality. They are blueprints for what comes next. If you keep saying, I always sabotage my success, you're giving your subconscious mind permission to do it again. If you say, I never follow through, you're programming your behavior before you even begin. It's not magic. It's psychology. The people who rise aren't the ones with perfect pasts. They're the ones who rewrite their internal script. Now let's be real. Your story might be true. You might have been through hell. You might have been betrayed, abused, abandoned, ridiculed. You don't need to minimize that. You don't need to pretend it didn't happen, but you do need to decide if it's going to define you. Because if you keep carrying the pain of the past into the decisions of your future, you'll never move forward. There comes a moment where I have to draw a line and say, this happened. It hurt, but it's not the end of my story. It's the beginning of a new one. Too many people are waiting for a breakthrough. What they really need is a breakaway, a clean break from the identity that no longer serves them. It doesn't matter how long you've been telling the old story. It doesn't matter who believed it with you. It doesn't matter how comfortable it feels. Growth requires a narrative that pulls you forward, not one that keeps you chained to the past. And sometimes that means letting go of who you think you are so you can become who you were meant to be. So take a look at the script you've been reciting in your head. What do you tell yourself when things go wrong, when you feel challenged, when you're alone? Is that voice helping you rise or keeping you small? Is it reinforcing strength or weakness? You've got to confront that voice and decide if it still deserves airtime in your mind. Because the future isn't created by chance. It's created by the language you speak to yourself every single day. Don't underestimate the power of rewriting your story. It won't be easy. It'll feel unfamiliar. It'll take work. But the moment you stop saying, this is just who I am, and start asking, who do I want to become? Everything changes. Not because the past disappears, but because it no longer defines you. You become bigger than your story. And when that happens, your story becomes a stepping stone, not a sentence. So no matter what you've been through, no matter how long you've been carrying it, it's time to flip the script. Your story isn't over. In fact, the best part hasn't even been written yet. Accountability is a word that makes people flinch. It sounds like blame. It sounds like guilt. Real accountability isn't about punishment. It's about power. It's not there to weigh you down. It's there to wake you up. Because the moment you take full ownership of your life without pointing fingers, without making excuses, without waiting for someone else to change first, that is the moment you unlock your freedom. The moment you say, this is mine, is the moment you finally realize, that means I can change it. Most people spend their lives trapped in a pattern of deflection. It's always someone else's fault. It's the job. It's the government. It's the parents. It's the aches. It's the boss. It's the market. They'll blame anything outside themselves because that's easier than facing the truth that most of what's broken in their lives they've tolerated, most of what's wrong they've enabled, and most of what they hate they've secretly agreed to by choosing not to take action. That's the raw truth no one wants to admit, but the only truth that can actually set you free. See, responsibility isn't about assigning fault, it's about reclaiming control. When you say, This is my life and I'm responsible for how I respond to it. You're no longer a victim of your circumstances. You become the author of your direction. And that shift, that's everything. That's the moment you stop waiting to be rescued and start building the life you were meant for. But let's be real, ownership is hard. It means looking at the parts of your life that don't work and admitting, I let that slide. It means seeing your health, your habits, your finances, your relationships, and realizing that wherever there's chaos, there's also a lack of ownership. It means you stop pointing out what other people did wrong. You start asking, what did I allow? What did I ignore? What did I run from? That level of honesty is rare. It's uncomfortable, but it's powerful because now you've stopped giving your power away. You can't fix what you won't claim. You can't rise above what you won't confront. And you certainly can't grow beyond the level of responsibility you're willing to take. But most people aren't willing to go that far. They'd rather keep playing small and safe, hiding behind the illusion that they have no choice. Because when you say it's not my fault, you also say it's not my solution. And that might feel easier in the short term, but in the long run, it costs you everything. There's a version of you on the other side of accountability that's stronger, sharper, more capable than you've ever imagined. That version doesn't avoid tough conversations. That version doesn't pretend to be okay while their life is falling apart. That version doesn't settle for excuses or wait for motivation to strike. That version is built on truth. That version shows up when it's hard. That version keeps going when no one's clapping. You can't access that version by running from responsibility. You access it by walking straight into it and owning every part of your life. The moment you start to say things like, I'm responsible for my time. I'm responsible for my results. Responsible for how I treat people. I'm responsible for my emotional state. Everything shifts because when you take ownership of your emotions, your energy, your effort, and your environment, you become unshakable. Other people might still do things that disappoint you. Life might still throw curveballs, but you're not at the mercy of those things anymore because you've chosen to lead yourself. And when you lead yourself, nothing can stop you for long. Accountability is not about being hard on yourself. It's about being honest with yourself. It's about holding yourself to a higher standard, not because you have to, because you've decided that who you are now is no longer enough for where you want to go. It's not about being perfect. It's about being responsible, and responsibility isn't a burden. It's a gift because once you take it, no one can take it from you. And that's where true confidence is born, not from pretending everything's fine, not from blaming others, but from knowing that no matter what happens, you've got you and that kind of inner power. That kind of mental clarity, it doesn't come from talking about change. It comes from taking responsibility for everything you can control and then doing something about it. So stop lying to yourself that accountability is punishment. It's not. It's permission. Permission to grow, permission to reset, permission to take the pen back and start writing a new chapter of your life. One where you stop pointing at the world and start pointing at the mirror, because that's where the real change begins, right there. With you. You can't build real confidence on a foundation of lies. You can fake it for a while. You can talk a big game. You can post the quotes, wear the mask, play the part, but eventually the cracks show. And when they do, everything built on top of that false image starts to crumble. Confidence is not about pretending. It's not about image. It's not about showing the world a polished version of yourself. Real confidence is about trust. Trust in your own word, trust in your own ability, trust in your own character. And that trust only comes from one place, is self-honesty. Most people don't lack confidence. They lack alignment. They say one thing and do another. They talk about discipline, but choose comfort. They speak about goals, but don't follow through. And deep down, they know it. That's why they feel off. That's why they feel stuck. It's not that they're broken. It's that they've broken the agreement with themselves too many times to believe their own words anymore. Because you can fool the world, but you can't fool your own soul. You know, when you're lying to yourself, you feel it in your body. You hear it in your inner voice. You carry it like weight on your back. And that's what erodes confidence. Not failure, but the little lies, the skipped commitments, the excuses. The moments when no one's watching and you choose what's easy over what's right, those decisions don't just disappear. They add up. And over time, they teach your mind one very dangerous thing, not to trust you. So then when you set a new goal, you make a new promise, your brain doesn't believe you anymore. You've trained it to doubt you. That's not a motivation problem. That's an integrity problem. And until you fix that, no external success will ever feel like enough. Here's the good news. Just like you trained yourself to break trust, you can train yourself to rebuild it. One action at a time. One honest decision at a time. It starts when you stop making promises you don't plan to keep. When you say, I'm going to do this, and then actually do it, even if it's small, even if it's uncomfortable, even if nobody else cares, especially when nobody's watching, because those are the moments that shape who you are. That's where the real confidence is built, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows, not in the highlight reel, but in the daily grind. You don't need to feel confident to take action. That's another lie we're sold. Confidence doesn't come first. Courage does. You show up, you follow through, you push past what's comfortable. And every time you do, you stack another brick on the foundation of real, unshakable self-belief. Not belief based on hype, belief based on history, on patterns, on proof. That's how it works. Confidence is earned. It's not given. You don't get it from compliments or applause. You get it from doing the thing you said you'd do when it was easier not to. And yes, that means being brutally honest with yourself. It means admitting where you've been soft. It means calling out your own patterns. It means getting real about what's holding you back and understanding that most of it isn't outside of you. It's inside. The good news is if it's inside you, that means it's under your control. And when you finally look in the mirror and say, I've been lying to myself, but I'm done now, something shifts. You take your power back. You reclaim your voice. You stop waiting to feel worthy and you start living in a way that proves you already are. This is the turning point. When you decide that your standards are no longer negotiable, you stop looking for confidence and start becoming the kind of person you can believe in. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. You don't lie. You don't flinch. You don't hide. You say what you mean and you follow through. That's what builds a foundation no storm can shake. That's the version of you that doesn't need motivation. That's the version of you that doesn't fold under pressure. That's the version that shows up because it's who you are now, not who you're trying to be. And the truth is that version of you is already inside. It's just been buried under the noise, under the lies, under the doubt. Once you start being honest with yourself, radically honest, you'll feel it wake up. And when it does, you won't need to look outside for validation anymore because you'll know. You'll know who you are, what you're capable of, why you're unstoppable now, because nothing is stronger than a person who can look themselves in the eye and say, I trust me. There comes a point in your life when no amount of advice, motivation, or strategy will work. Not because those things don't matter, but because you're still hiding from yourself. You can't change what you refuse to look at. You can't heal what you keep covering up. Transformation doesn't begin with information. It begins with confrontation, and it starts in the mirror, not metaphorically, literally, because the person staring back at you isn't the world's biggest problem in your life. It's the one person who holds the key to everything changing. But as long as you keep avoiding your reflection, you'll keep avoiding your responsibility. Without responsibility, there's no power. Facing the mirror isn't about judgment. It's about truth. It's about being real enough to say, here's where I'm at. Here's what I've been avoiding. Here's who I've been pretending to be. That level of self-awareness takes guts. It's not easy. It's not fun, but it's necessary because the mirror doesn't care about your excuses. It doesn't respond to your reasons. It only shows you who you are. And if you don't like what you see, the answer isn't to turn away. It's to go to work. Most people don't look in the mirror to learn. They look to criticize. They use it as a weapon instead of a window. That's not the point. The mirror doesn't exist to shame you. It exists to wake you up, to force you to stop pretending that you're okay when you're falling apart, to remind you that you weren't made to coast through life, playing small, repeating the same patterns year after year, hoping for a breakthrough that never comes. The mirror asks you a simple question. Are you being honest with yourself? And if the answer is no, then that's the exact place you need to begin. It's in the mirror where you realize you've been tolerating too much. You've been letting yourself off the hook. You've been avoiding difficult conversations. You've been chasing comfort at the cost of your growth. You've been waiting for the perfect time to take action while your life passes you by. And the longer you run from the mirror, the more damage you do. Not because the mirror is harsh, but because ignoring your truth doesn't protect you. It weakens you. It conditions you to accept a version of yourself that's smaller than what you're capable of being. And here's the truth no one talks about. Deep down, you already know what you need to change. You don't need more opinions. You don't need more books. You don't need to ask 5 people what to do next. You already know. You've always known. But knowing doesn't change anything. Looking does. Owning does. Acting does. The reason you haven't changed isn't because you're confused. It's because you're scared. Scared of the work. Scared of letting go. Scared of who you might become. But fear only has power over you when you keep turning away. You finally face it head on in the mirror, it starts to lose its grip. When you look into the mirror and finally say, I've been lying to myself, you create the first honest moment in your process. It's a reset. It's a declaration. It's the end of pretending. And that's where strength is born, not in perfection, but in raw, unfiltered truth. From that place you can build. From that place, you stop comparing yourself to others and start holding yourself to your own standard. That place, you begin to respect yourself, not for what you've achieved, but for what you're becoming. Transformation doesn't start with a new habit or a new goal. It starts when you finally stop running from your reflection. You stop using distractions, excuses, and ego to protect your comfort zone. When you strip everything down and see yourself, not the version you project, not the image you manage, but the person you truly are right now. And you say, enough. Ready to live with integrity. I'm ready to rise. I'm ready to face myself. Because that's where it all begins. Not in the gym, not in the job, not in the relationship, in the mirror. That's your battlefield. That's your foundation. That's your truth. And when you conquer that space, there's nothing you can't do. So stop running, stop covering, stop blaming. Stand still, face the mirror, and meet the version of you that's been waiting on the other side of honesty. That's not weakness. That's not defeat. That's the beginning of everything you're meant to become. Because when you look yourself in the eye and refuse to lie anymore, that's the moment your real life begins.